These 7 companies are really the pioneers in this sector, and many of them are leading the way for others. And we wanted to expose them. We wanted to give them the stage, and we carefully selected those companies, and they're now part of what we call the Games for Change Industry Circle, and you'll get to know them in a second. They're also very generously supporting Games for Change this year, and they were going to continue this program after the town hall by introducing them on webinars, in our newsletters throughout the year, so you will have more chances to engage. And Murat, please take it away.
Thanks, Asi. It's great to be here. I know Asi for more than 10 years, and I've been watching him build this into an amazing organization. So first of all, a round of applause for Games for Change. And obviously, I'm not from the industry, so I have no idea what the latest is or how you guys are doing. So today, I'll be looking at everything from that point of view, where every 6 months, we get around like 1,500 applications from technology startups. We look at their businesses, their market size, their business model, their go-to-market strategy, their positioning, their value proposition, the pain point they are solving, and we try to make a decision on if you want to invest in them or not. And we invest in 20 companies a year. So we make like 20 mistakes a year. So I made lots of mistakes. We made around 90 mistakes so far. So I've seen lots of different things. So I'm really looking forward to today, learning more about these amazing companies that are shaping the industry. So what we're going to do is every company has 6 minutes. They are going to introduce, first of all, what they are doing. And then for everyone in the audience, I think the goal is for you to get something out of this session today. They are going to talk about lessons learned and inflection points their businesses went through. And then they are going to talk about briefly about what they think, what are the changes needed or what needs to happen for Games for Change to become a huge industry with a clearly defined market, people pursuing tools and services. And after that, we are going to go into questions and answers, hopefully some answers, not just questions. So feel free to start thinking about the questions you want to ask. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And without further ado, first 6 minutes, here we go with Elizabeth Sarquis with Global Gaming Initiative.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. It's really an honor to be here today, and of course we have to applaud Asi and Susanna for a wonderful festival this year. I've had nothing but amazing feedback as to how happy everyone is and how much they're learning, as well as Global Gaming Initiative being a part of this community. I started in the audience about 5 years ago, thinking about how cool it would be to use games to change the world. And today we're telling you how we're going to be, how we've done that so far and how we're looking at it for the future. So we founded the company in 2012, and we released our first product in 2013. Our goal was to be able to connect people with games that were fun, entertaining, and to actually make a real difference. So we wanted to combine the virtual world and the real world. And that's been both really exciting and also really challenging. We have about 10 people on our team. Our headquarters are in New York, but we're really a satellite office. And we have some of the best and brightest minds. I have to brag about our team because they're pretty remarkable people. And they have been charged with a very big goal of how do we connect technology and philanthropy. So how can we use all of the best tools that exist in technology and really impact the lives of children all over the world? So what we've done so far is make 3 games, and actually our revenue is from in-app purchasing and ad revenue, and we're in the commercial market space, which is a very challenging area to be. So we sell our products in App Store and Google Play and some in Kindle, and we compete with everyone else. So you can imagine how hard that is. and also very, very rewarding when you get a lot of publicity and a lot of downloads. So we plan, I think we should go to the next slide. So I think the most important thing that I want to share with you guys today is I know that you love making games, and so do I, and so does our team. It is nothing more rewarding than to have some design in your mind and really bring that to fruition. And there's nothing more rewarding than to have people play your games. Our impact that we want to make is a lot more than that. So we decided that we were going to stop making games. And that was a big wow. This is why we exist. We wanted to, make games, tell our story, and connect with people so that they could see the difference they were making. But then what we found out was that there's a really big challenge, and it's in user acquisition, and it's in distribution. So as an indie developer, it's very difficult to be able to really get your products out in the hands of the commercial audience. So how do you do that? We realized that there's so many talented indie developers that never get a chance, so many amazing games. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could figure out a way to bring their games to market? So we're taking on the challenge at Global Gaming Initiative 2.0 to be able to harness all of those indie developers, bring them on board, and help market those games so that they can be a part of this revolution. It's really exciting because we never thought that we would be in this position. And then because of obviously being a part of the Games for Change community and people hearing about what we were doing, game developers around the world started calling and saying, can you publish our game? We're like, huh? We were just trying to make a game about giving bikes to kids in the beginning. That was it. And now people were like, gosh, help us figure out how to do that. So we did our first product, which you'll see if you come to the Tribeca family event on Saturday. And it's called Outbreak Responder, and it's about malaria. And that is a really cool game. It's a strategy game. And it was one of these situations where, okay, so we're trying that. Now that we know that that's something that is really accepted and really wonderful, we're going to bring a lot more indie developers on board and help them make a difference with us. I think the most important tip I can give you guys too is you have to make content that's really appealing. Whatever the content is, it has to be exciting for people. They have to want to do it. So as much as we want to teach them, we have to figure out ways to teach them while they're having fun.
Next slides.
Social good games have to be available, have to be inclusive to everyone. So I really liked it when the Prince was speaking yesterday because he was talking about like creating an entire transmedia world where they had none of this, they had no games, they had no videos, they had no cartoons, and all of a sudden they get to share the story from their perspective. So we have to keep in mind that we're in a global world and every single region of the world has a different story to tell. So we have to create content that's appealing. We have an animator that works for us who's Chinese, and she always, her style is so different than the American audience, and we always have to keep in mind what other cultures like. So I really think it's important. This particular community is the most vital community because it keeps an eye and a perspective on the global world.
Great, thank you so much. We'll come back. We'll have a chance to hear more about your thoughts. Let's go to the next company, Filament Games.
Thank you. And I think that nice orange folder that you have is a good time cue for us.
It says 2 minutes.
Okay.
So you guys know.
So my name's Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have a dead for Filament.
Not that I wouldn't mind representing Filament. We can do that.
What are we doing?
Okay. I want to steer though. Can I steer?
Please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. I'm Dan from Filament Games. Filament Games is an educational game development studio that exclusively develops learning games. This is our people. We have roughly 60 employees right now who make educational games. The cat does not work there. I had an awkward white space that I had to fill, so in went the cat. Sources of revenue I've listed here in order from greatest to least. Large corporations all the way down to research institutions who are hiring us to make something that they then study. We also have successfully applied for a number of SBIR grants through the Department of Education, National Science Foundation, which we use to build our own products, which we now sell on Steam and the Filament website, apropos to my prior presentation. A little bit of racketeering on the side, just because this business is hard. Okay, initial funding. I'm embarrassed to say it came from this atrocious screenshot. This is my master's thesis, and I took it to a conference called Serious Games out in DC, and it was the last session of the last day, and nobody attended except for a funder who said that I should apply for funding to finish out the game. I didn't know how much to ask for, so I asked for $1 million, and they gave it to us. And we built out this game in collaboration with the Jason project. It's now called A Resilient Planet. It's a cool game. How has our business model changed over time? Sorry, complex graphic here, but I'm going to walk you through it piece by piece here, and it's going to make sense. So at the very top, we have this timeline, the last 10 years. That's how long we've been in business. And then below that, I like to think of this space as being so there's two different ways to divide up the timeline over the last 10 years about how this space has evolved. The first is, and this is kind of borrowing language from Jim G, there's a little G era and the big G era. So up until about 2009, people were coming to us and they were asking us just to build a game. They say, here's a set of learning objectives, make us a game, thanks. After that, the big G era, we started to see game ecosystems. So there's the game, and then there are websites around the games, and dashboards, and gamulations, and tools that weren't really games, but they were playful. And then below that, I have what I call the first validation, the identity era, and then the second validation era. The first validation era is, does it work? Like, why would we use video games to teach things? And so most of our business development conversations are trying to convince people that games could actually be effective teaching tools. The identity area is like, okay, at a certain point, which is around 2010, people stopped asking this question of, is it a good idea? And started asking, well, what does actually like a good learning game look like? And then now we're in the second validation era, which is the most exciting era of all, which is where people are asking, sorry, you probably can't see the fine print there, but people are asking, wow, 2020 vision, congratulations. So down below, I've mapped out major milestones for the company on the timeline of the Earth to give you a sense of context. So the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Our company was formed a little bit before the moon, so we beat the moon, that's exciting. Shortly after 1 billion years into the timeline of the Earth, we meet our courts. You may know them as iCivics, Justice Sanjay O'Connor's organization that uses games to teach civics concepts. And then, coincidentally, around 2 billion years in alignment with the transition to the big G era, we hire a web team so we can start making these game ecosystems, things live around the games. Shortly after oxygen is established in the atmosphere, we see this dramatic shift toward commercialization. Right? So that's where prior to that, people were mostly asking us to make things that they gave away for free. After that, they're asking us to make things that they attempt to sell. And before significant life is established at 4 billion years, we have established the ability to publish our own products, which is exciting. Okay, best business decision, most important tip. Just do what Jim G says. That seems to have worked out pretty well for us over the years. And of course, make good games is important too. Last but not least, in answer to this question of how we move the industry forward, I'm going to focus specifically on K-12. I think there's a lot of ways to answer this question. But in K-12, if I could change anything, it would be time. I'd give teachers more time. So teachers often have to cover a lot of content in a short period of time, usually in preparation for some sort of high-stakes summative examination upon which their value as a professional is based. Game-based learning, I like to think of as being kind of more like project-based learning. It's a totally different pedagogy. It's not about content coverage. In fact, it's a terrible tool for content coverage. Much better for systems thinking, 21st century skills, procedural knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So what I would like to see is the time to implement game-based learning in the classroom, much like project-based learning. It would help if schools also had more money to spend, but I actually think if we solve for one, which is time, then they actually have more money to spend, because those basal programs that feed that content grind actually cost a ton of money. And if they didn't have to spend money on that, they could buy our video games. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Let's see who we have next. have Schell Games. Is this the right order? Or? Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I think we skip someone. We'll come back.
Sorry, Matt. I'm Jake from Schell Games. I'm the COO there. And we were formed in 2002 by Jesse Schell. And 2002 felt like a long time ago, but now I feel like it was a long time after the moon was formed. So maybe it wasn't that long ago. We have about 100 people right now. And we're full service game design and development shop. So we have a bunch of talented engineers and artists and game designers and producers all doing great things. So that is Schell Games. Okay, so what did I put up there? We were talking about two kind of key moments in your company's history. So one really is all about Jesse. So Jesse, in 2002, left Disney. He was a creative director of the virtual reality studio in Disney, and went to Carnegie Mellon to teach at the Entertainment Technology Center. So as soon as he got there, pretty much Disney called and said, hey, yeah, we know you're not here anymore, but could you do some consulting? Sure, yeah, I can do some consulting. One thing led to another, and eventually they called and said, here, we got this project. Great. And then Jesse said, well, boy, that's pretty big. I'd have to hire people. And they said, yeah, well, go ahead. And he said, yeah, I guess I could. And so that, and then the next thing you know, it's 2015, we have 100 people. So sometimes I know he looks around and says, whoa, how did I get here? But it all started with him making that leap, and that's advice to people is just do it, right? Just make the leap. And then, but, and I have a but, you want to be careful of where you end up in that bowl, in that fish bowl, right? So about 6 years ago, we looked around and said, boy, the game industry, the traditional game industry is getting to a very bloody place, which we don't think we want to be in. And we took a look around and said, you know what, transformational games, education, games for change, is the place we want to be and we want to specialize in. So we really embraced that about 6 years ago, and we're certainly very happy to be part of this crowd. We're inspired every time we come here, and so that was a big move for us. So go ahead and flip the slide.
Next slide.
Okay, so the industry. When I thought about this, I thought about a few things that would really help move the industry forward. One is about schools and standardizing tech platforms, hardware, software, networks. That's really frustrating for people trying to deal with the schools, as we know. So the more that can happen, certainly that will encourage people to. The second point, be brave, right? And I put bravery on there, but it's really be more bravery because again, as we've seen over the last few days, there's an incredible amount of bravery already happening. But more of that will be necessary to really move the industry into that next level. And that's on every level from schools making, we see different schools breaking out of that norm and moving to a technology-focused, game-based learning and all the other initiatives that are going on, jumping ahead of the traditional schools. But entrepreneurs, foundations, all of those entities need to continue to be brave and be more brave. And then, what else did I have up there? Oh, successes. This industry needs successes, big successes. Any industry kind of needs that big success to move it forward, and that breeds, as we know, other successes. We're super excited. If you saw Jesse's talk last night about the world of Lexica with Amplify, we're super excited about that. We certainly feel like that has the potential to be one of those big successes. But there needs to be more than one, and we're really excited to see how that unfolds. So Schell
Great.
Games.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Justin Leites with Amplify. The company that I work for was called Wireless Generation, I guess now 15 years ago, with the co-founders, two of them sitting in the back of classrooms wondering what could be useful for teachers. And one of them was a Star Trek geek, and he thought what teachers really need is a tricorder. And they developed something which was on Palm Pilots in those days. The company became the largest, I think, purchaser of Palm Pilots at a certain point of putting things in teachers' hands. About 5 years ago, I guess, we were acquired 4 or 5 years ago by a larger corporation, which meant that we had all of a sudden new capital to invest in curriculum and materials for teachers and for students. And I convinced them to let me launch a games division, educational games. And we didn't have any internal capacity in the company to do educational games, so I started coming. Smartest things I ever did was come to this conference, and I saw one of Jesse's talks and thought, well, let's start with him. And then I started sort of hat in hand, going around the world, Europe, Latin America, trying to find designers who had done games that I loved or that someone pointed out that we loved, and convinced them to do a portfolio for us. And so the advantage we have, when we came in both with a lot of funding so that the developers could do the work they wanted to do without having to take the financial risk. But the other is we have an established sales force and relationships at the school district level with most of the large school districts in the United States, where we have other non-game products which cover sold in all 50 states. And I guess at this point reach about 200,000 teachers and 3 million kids. So that's the company. We're this year, after 3 years of starting with nothing, and these are we had very much, not every company we reached out to and did things worked out. The ones you're seeing up there are the ones that did work that was really great. And so we now have 29 of their games just in the past few months in the App Store for schools, and another 4 or 5 coming in the next couple months. So to go from 0 to that as a publisher at the level of quality. And you see these are, the kinds of games that we publish are, I think, complementary to the ones that Dan talked about, and that we face the same problem about the time crunch. And our response was, let's solve the problem of all of the time, both in school and out of school, that is not under the teacher's control right now. And so in a way, I think our model, our inspiration is the school library, where the librarian, in school libraries, librarians look at our stuff and they get it right away, and we learned a huge amount from them about how to reach kids and how to work with schools and school districts in a way that was rigorous, but grabbed some of that time that teachers, homework, that's a whole other talk, but homework doesn't work particularly well. Jesse alluded to this yesterday. It's kind of a broken institution, so even the best teachers now have trouble getting their kids to do homework. So these are the studios. I would say the 2 things that we did right that I would one is understanding the audience and what is required. Dan hinted at this, or pointed this point about, if you want to compete with commercial games for kids' time and kind of get what they're thinking about during the day, not just when they're playing the game, but are they thinking about the game during their free time, when they're just in their heads, is really understanding what engages them. So some of that is the Jim G affinity spaces. That's really important. Self-determination theory, if anyone's not familiar with it, that is, I would say, absolutely the most rigorous and really useful research we found about how to keep kids or anyone engaged over long periods of time. And then the Carol Dweck research about mindset. Those are the things that really helped us. So all of our games, we focus on adolescents, we kind of put through those filters of where they work. Next slide. The other thing about big G games, this is in a way, again, coming after Dan is a hard act to follow because I agree with him about so much of this, but the competition that we see in the marketplace is not between, say, Amplify and the other people who are up on the stage. I think I also agree that to the extent that any of us succeed, it'll help all of us. The competition is really with that slide the awful math slide that Dan showed. The version of it that we see in the marketplace is something called Dimension U, which is literally multiple choice questions that can be slotted in to a kind of gamey environment. And they sell it to schools because any multiple choice question you want to put in can be put in their game. So it fits all grades and subjects, and it's about as awful as it sounds, right? But to get a school district administrator who's making the big purchase decision to understand the difference between that and one of Dan's games, or a BrainPOP game, or a Jesse Schell game, those are conversations we're having, but that is the hard work right now, I think, on the distribution side, which we're getting there, but it's not easy. Last slide. So, yeah, well, I guess that was it, actually.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm craning my neck a lot, so I think I'm going to stand up as well. So I'm Karina Linch. I'm with BrainPOP, in charge of product there. And BrainPOP's been around for some time, so we're not a startup anymore. We've been around for about 15 years. BrainPOP was originally started by Dr. Avram Kadar. He's a pediatrician and immunologist. And he wanted to explain to kids what was happening in their bodies when they had an asthma attack or were experiencing allergies. And so he thought if I could just show them what was happening, it would be much easier than trying to explain it here in the doctor's office. And so he wanted to make short animations that would help do that. He first put them on CD-ROM, but the internet was coming out and realized that it would be much more valuable to put them online. So BrainPOP.com was started off with a bunch of health movies that explained what was happening to kids, and it became incredibly successful. Teachers really took to it and made more and more requests for more content. If you can explain what's happening, to your lungs or to your heart, can you explain what's happening in these other subject areas as well? And so it really grew out of letters from students, letters from teachers, and grew from there. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide other than to just kind of talk about, I think we have really made our way into the school system. We're in about 20% of US schools where they're subscribing to BrainPOP, even though we intended to be very much like a family product between parent and child. That was where we evolved, and I think part of the best advice I could give you is to be flexible. Sometimes the product you want to be isn't the product you wind up becoming. We are also, we're based here in New York City, but we're growing internationally. So we now have some offices abroad, and we've also developed regional sales offices here in the US. The reason why we're here speaking at Games for Change is one of the things we developed a few years ago is a learning games platform called Game Up. And so on that platform, we have about 42 partners, over 100 games. And the reason that we got into this space is I came to Games for Change, I think for the first time about 9 years ago, and wound up seeing all these incredible games that I didn't get to use as a teacher. And at first, I remember the first time I played Lure of the Labyrinth, and I just thought it was the most incredible experience. It made it so clear that math was fun. And I fell in love with it, and then I got really angry, like, why didn't I know about this stuff? And it turned out that there were these incredible games that were being made, being funded, and then they sometimes languished on like a university website or a research site, or sometimes they didn't even make it to any site. And we thought that was a real shame, and that these games should be in schools and they should be played. So that's why we started Game Up. We didn't set out to make all the games ourselves. We knew there was absolutely wonderful stuff out there, and that it needed to be kind of packaged in a way that it could get into schools and be accessible right away. We'll go to the next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm controlling it. Sorry about that. So this is, I don't know if you can see the image here, but it's actually a teacher kissing a pig. And the reason I decided to put that image up there is that it's an image from a school it's actually Hadley Elementary School in Michigan. And last December, they held a Kiss the Pig fundraiser because they'd lost BrainPOP due to budget cuts in their school. And the students and teachers were so angry about it that they held this fundraiser. The kids all competed to see which teacher would have to kiss a pig. And they brought BrainPOP back into their school. So I suggest that you try to make products that teachers and students will fight to get into schools rather than they're told that they have to use. It's a pretty huge difference. You want to bridge the gap between school and home. Parents have to see the value in what you're doing. And big thing for us is if we had remained a product that had just been about health topics, I don't know if administrators would have wanted to get BrainPOP in because we didn't apply to the whole school. So even if you make really wonderful games that are about a very specific subject area, you might want to consider being a part of a larger platform or distribution channel because administrators tend to purchase things that have a bigger impact across the school. Let's go to the next slide, which I will do. Biggest piece of advice I hear all the time, people coming in, they're gonna disrupt education, they're gonna start a revolution, their game is the magic bullet. Don't talk that way to teachers. It's insulting and you will not be accepted in their classroom if you talk that way. Come in, be humble, say what can I do to help, what can I do to help you be a more effective teacher, tell me where your problems are, be a listener. Number 2, learning games are not new. There are brilliant mentors out there, find them. The best cab ride I ever had in my life, the most informative one, was with Jim G. He's an awesome mentor. But in addition to him, Scott Osterwile has totally, continually helps me understand what a good learning game is. He and Eric Kloffler do a free course on game design on MIT's OpenCourseWare. So if you're a game designer and you're not sure about pedagogy, or if you're in education and you're not sure about how to get into game design, they already know how to marry those two things. So learn from the amazing mentors that are out there. Collaborate, help each other. That's why we started Game Up. So I'll announce we have a new partnership with the Institute of Play. They do amazing things at Quest to Learn. They've been refining and iterating on games for years, but those games have been constrained to the Quest to Learn school that's down the road from us. So we're gonna help digitize those games and get them out there in front of more and more students and make them available to everyone. Designing for the classroom doesn't have to be a constraint. It can be a real opportunity too. And privacy, formative assessment. Hopefully you're really focusing on those things if you're a game designer, and if you're not, go to the Future of Privacy website, find out why you need to be encrypted, find out why you need to protect student data, and formative assessment should be on your mind before you design your game.
Thanks so much. Let's see who's next. It's Ron.
Yep, we'll find your slides.
No rush.
All right, happy to be here. I think I've been annoying Asi for a couple of years to do this. So it's good to have everyone here and have all these great companies talk about what they do and then have a conversation with you. So a little bit about us. I'm Ron Goldman. I'm co-founder and CEO of Kognito. We're here in the city. We've been around for since 2003. We're about 45 people, and our concentration is really around changing behaviors and changing attitudes as they relate to health and social issues. We do this particularly with one type of an experience, which you can see a snapshot of that here, which is conversations. So all of our games, all of our simulations are all about giving you the ability to practice a challenging conversation and learn how to best manage it to drive those changes in health, which can be anything from seeking help for behavioral health or PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We've done a lot of work with the VA around that, or even in changing your adherence to medication, if you have diabetes and other elements like that. So for us, it's all about one type of an experience, and it's all about behaviors and not just about building skills or building knowledge. We have built our company with no outside funding, so it kind of forced us to go and look for contracts, which is the majority way in which we fund our business. So these are licensing contracts with organizations from state, federal, commercial organization that license from us content to make it available to their doctors, their teachers, their students, parents, and on and on. So we have a fairly wide reach around the country. We're almost in every state at this point, in a number of also international markets. In terms of critical moments, I mean, we've been at it for a while, so obviously there's been a lot of good decisions and some bad ones, but if I want to point out the good ones, I will say that, first of all, we, for the first 5 years, were a custom shop, which was fun if you can convince somebody to give you money to build something, but it was very difficult for us to build that as a sustainable business and as to really grow it. So we really moved to a product base where we took a chance, we invested in building a few initial products that did very well, and that allowed us to really do the majority of our revenue through licensing and not through custom. The other thing is building an underlying technology platform. We realized in the first couple of projects that it's very expensive to build what we do. And if we have to wait a year and spend $1 million every time we need to build something, it's just not going to go anywhere. So we spent a lot of time building an engine for us to be able to author and deliver, and that helped us expedite how quickly we can build it, but also do it in much less expense. As I mentioned, we concentrate on one type of an experience. It helps us differentiate us in the market. People come to us because they look for these conversations. They know that that's the challenge that they're facing. So within this clutter, because for us, our industry is not just games. It's really, we're in the business of, in the industry of healthcare, where there's a lot of companies trying to change behaviors with alerts on your phone and with website and on and on. So for us to be able to differentiate ourselves with one particular approach was very, very helpful. We also build an expertise in a specific type of a behavior change, right, in terms of health behaviors. And I think the last thing was probably the biggest thing that changed our growth was our ability to show the efficacy of these simulations and games. My co-founder and colleague, Dr. Glenn Albright, is a clinical psychologist. Always good to have somebody like that around, but definitely because they can help you assess that what you do actually works or doesn't work. So we have 3 game-based simulations listed in what's known as the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. It's run by the government. They're actually still the only interactive experiences, not even games, just interactive experience listed, and that gives us a huge leg up in terms of contracting, in terms of being able to compete. So, I have 2 minutes. So in terms of next steps in converting games for change, I think the first one, I heard a lot of people talk about this, prove the change. So we're talking about games for change, and then I hear people saying, oh, this thing is going to change everything people do, and people think, could you please assess it and have some data that actually backs it up? So, which, thank you. It's very easy to say, very difficult to do, so I don't want to make it sound easy. But it's just very difficult to sell. I mean, we go in front of healthcare companies, or I go in front of the DOD or the VA, and their first question, after they say, this is really cool, is this actually work? Do you have any data? So it's very difficult for us as a business to do anything if we can't prove it. So I think that that's probably the biggest thing. And I know a lot of people work on this. This is not the first, I'm not the first person to say it. I think the second one people brought up here, don't sell games, actually sell solutions. If you show up to people and say, oh, I have this great game, and it's like they don't necessarily think about a game as the solution, they have a problem. If you can convince them that your experience that is a game or use game mechanics can solve it and can be integrated with everything else they're doing, just like the example here from BrainPOP is that don't go to the teacher and say, I'm going to change everything. Well, the teacher is the teacher, the class is the class. You can't eliminate that whole thing. You got to live within what they give you. I think the third one, and this is kind of, I think, a good place where we can do this, there's nothing wrong with making money while you do good things. And I think over the years in this conference and others, it's been very kind of unpopular to ask somebody, oh, great idea, how are you going to make money on it? Not because you want to be rich, but because you actually want to continue to sustain your business and you want to be able to do more. So I think let's all just agree that it's okay to talk about money in this conference. There's nothing wrong with that. We all want to actually work in this and not just do a one-off project and go home. So I'm done. Thank you very much. The missing slides should be here somewhere.
You might have the improv.
They should be here.
It's okay, I can go without slides. I think Dan had enough for all of us anyway, so. Yeah, exactly. So my name is Matt Frenz. I'm the head of content partnerships at Glasslab. Glasslab was founded about 3 years ago by a couple of organizations. We were funded by the Gates and MacArthur Foundations, EA, Pearson Research, ETS were also founding partners. And the goal was really to build games, A, that were just as engaging as the games kids play at home, and B, to make the learning that was happening in those games visible to the students, visible to the teachers, visible to parents and administrators. And so we're about a 20-person company now that's comprised of commercial game designers, psychometricians, learning designers, business folks that have been in education for quite some time. We really tried to have that full solution in-house. We currently, our sources of revenue are mostly grants right now, although we just recently we released our licensing for our platform. And what Glasslab has decided to do is not just create and distribute our own games, but enable other games from around the industry to also get into schools. And really the genesis of this was we were building not just the infrastructure to do formative assessment with our games, but the infrastructure to get distribution into schools. So that includes user management, classroom management, reporting. All of these things are incredibly expensive and labor intensive. We realized that we were spending about 2/3 of our money, of our budget, on building out this infrastructure and about 1/3 on building out the games. Which if you have commercial game designers in your studio, you can imagine what sort of reception that got from them. And so while that was happening, we also had a lot of game developers from around the industry coming to us and saying, you know we have a wonderful game, we know it helps kids learn, or at least we believe it does. Right now we're scraping by on App Store sales and grants. And really we would love to get distribution into schools because it helps, it'll help more kids. And it will, it will help us make more amazing games. And after hearing that over and over and over again from developers, and having this budget issue that I spoke about, the critical moment, if I had my critical moment slide up here, was when we decided to begin working with these other developers and to try and create that full service solution for developers and for teachers and schools and students as well. When I thought about the best decision that we made as an organization, by far, I believe that's the best decision that we've made. Ulu Lab, iCivics, BrainQuake, Schell Games, I'm missing a couple, Game Desk, the Learning Games Lab at NMSU. These are extraordinary partners doing extraordinary work, and we really, really want to help them, and they have helped us as much as we have helped them, actually probably even more so if you think about the list of developers that I just named. They all have slightly different expertise, they all have slightly different backgrounds, and so we've learned as much as they have from us, and that's really the goal, is to do this as a community. Because we really believe that Glasslab can by no means open up this K-12 market alone. It needs to be a joint effort. A lot of people ask us, you're working with your competition, and my response is there has to be a market for there to be competition. Talk to me then, right? Until then, let's work together and do this. So I don't, as far as advice goes, I don't really like to offer too much advice to game developers besides make a great game and work with each other and learn from one another. That's most certainly been our guiding light. As far as what Glasslab is trying to do to move the industry forward, one of the things that we want to do obviously is scale our distribution, and we're doing that through partnerships, and we're doing it through building a sales channel and things like that, the things that you would imagine. We really need to create a better feedback loop between educators, students, and game developers. There's a lot of ways to do that. We're exploring all of them. Again, I'm not going to give advice to a game developer, but I highly suggest you go to a classroom and get advice from students and teachers. That is your best source of inspiration. It's been my best source of inspiration, is going and sitting in classrooms, and they're going to steer you in the right direction. The other thing that we really want to do is provide better learning game data, not just to the teacher through reports, but back to the game designer. Help them make their game better through the data that's coming out of their game. There's solutions to help monetize your game. There's solutions for distribution in the commercial market. There's solutions in all sorts of different data aspects, but learning data is something that game developers often don't have that much access to, and we really want to help them get that. And the way that we're doing that is creating a standard data structure for learning games, building on prior work in that field, and really allowing people to build to that standard, have these reports as an endpoint, and in the middle, we're providing solutions to them to really look at what's happening both inside the game as well as consumers on a macro level and make decisions about what they need to do next. And that's about it. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you so much for all sharing. That was an amazing learning experience for me. I'm very impressed. We have 36 minutes with those amazing people here, the brain trusts of the industry. So first, I'll bring up one point and then we'll open it up for questions from you. When people I know, relatives or just friends, come up to me and say, hey Murat, I have a great idea, I want to start a company. First thing I tell them is create an investor deck for a venture capitalist. Who knows what a VC is? Some people don't know, but VCs are people who are paid to invest in startups or businesses. They are professionals, they go through a checklist, they look at the business model, they look at a lot of different things, but mainly they look at if there's an exit possibility for this business. Is it a lifestyle business or can it scale? So on that note, I just want to quickly, I know it doesn't apply to everybody here, but of the 7 companies here, has anyone raised any VC funding or any other funding, outside funding, and how was the experience? Again, we can have like 1 or 2 answers, not everybody. All right.
Even if you just discussed it.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll discuss it. I think that it's a good question because nobody here actually raised money, which is, if I was a VC, that would be actually concerning. I could say that in our case, as Kognito, we are, if this event took place next week, my answer might be different because we're actually in the process of securing a first round of investment for us to really expand our business, because we are in fairly large industries like healthcare and where there is a tremendous amount of opportunity with everything that's happening. So I think that it's interesting that nobody did. I think that the more we see it, the better it is, because that will show investors that there is $100 million companies or $500 million companies. I think Amplify is a little bit of a different example, because you guys don't need that in a way, because you're already owned by one of the largest media companies in the universe. So
correct. So actually, that's a great signal for the industry, because rising tide lifts all the boats, as somebody just said. Yes.
So 2 things. I mean, I didn't have to raise external funding. What I had to do was, within a large corporation, I had to invest them. It's the largest investment anyone's ever made in educational games. And,
excellent.
So I went through the first 9 months. I had a deck which turned into a 30-page single-space document, which went through at least 50 iterations. And that was my job for 9 months, was to do that. I would say now, the one area where we are exploring partnerships and raising money is international. So in places like India, there are partners who both have their own distribution channels, and Bangalore has plenty of capital. They are actually, I think the big difference, I used to work for the United Nations, was it would be countries like the United States that would provide the capital, and maybe the programs would be deployed in countries like India. Now, actually, the capital can come from those places, China, India, Brazil, as well.
That is very interesting. But again, like all these VCs, will look at exit possibility, because without the exit, they have no incentive. If you're not going to sell your business or go public with an IPO, they will not give you money. So here, just curious, Has anyone approached you about M&A, exits, or bankers for an IPO, or run again?
Yeah, our last 6 months has been very interesting for us as a company because we have actually been approached by a media company, not News Corp, for a full acquisition of our business, which was surprising for us because when we started the business, we never thought we'll be at a stage like that somebody is willing to pay you real money for what you do. We ended up not going that route, and we are going the route of increasing funding to our business, which we're in a good position to do it because we're a profitable company, we have revenue, so it's a little bit of an easier deal to sign because you're not giving away your business. And I would say if the investors were here, the only reason they're giving us money is because they think they can sell us for a lot of money one day.
Okay, great.
That's the only reason.
Excellent. So I have one. Would you like to say something?
Do you mind?
Yes.
Sure. So I know, so Filament is not particularly exit oriented. We have been approached before, both by VC and acquisition folks. But I would like to talk about the middle ground between lifestyle company, which I think is a somewhat pejorative term, if I'm not mistaken, and a company that's purely exit oriented. For us as a company that's developing products across the spectrum of ages and subject matters, but primarily targeted at K-12, the patience is a virtue because this space is growing up very slowly, having done this for 10 years. Some things have changed dramatically, a lot of things haven't changed at all, and our hope is that we can still be doing this in 10 years because we think that's going to be what it actually takes in order to be successful in this space.
So for Global Gaming Initiative 2.0, definitely we're focusing very strongly on the scalability of our model as we are moving from just making a single game to really being that game space where people play games for social impact. So definitely the VC and the investment deck is very important. And next year, hopefully, we'll have some really good news to share with you.
Okay, that's great. So, yes,
we've been approached, but what we usually say is what they'll have to do, what VCs would have to do for us is give us a lot of money and then get out of our way. And they're not very good at that usually, so that's...
No, not exactly. Okay, great. So what brilliant questions does the audience have? The first one. You can just stand up and talk. Yeah. Thank you.
Nervous, but I have to call somebody out. So I saw these slides. One of the slides had these really cute characters at the bottom, and they seemed really cute, but one of them was super problematic. And in a game where you can possibly, distribute this to kids and, have a whole bunch of students across the country play this, it's really problematic to have indigenous populations represented and being played by indigenous people, and it seems really harmless because they're kind of friendly and cute and whatever, but it does real harm. Like, there's a big problem with youth suicides on reservations, and so I just need to call out attention that when you're designing characters, you really have to pay attention to
Thank you.
how they're...
Great point. Thank you very much. Next question.
Thank you very much. This is very enlightening. My question has to do with the future of the industry, and the question has to do with interoperability of platforms, distribution systems. So if we're looking at the global market, we now have examples that were cited by our panelists. There is a huge market in the developing world, but of course the realities on the technology side is even in a country that I know of, 7 or 8 out of 10 people have a Facebook account. But providing online material is a problem. There's a problem with power outage, low bandwidth, and just access to the computers, tablets, etc. Now there are projects funded by donors that provide tablets, for example, for kids. So there's starting to change in terms of access to the equipment. But on the producer side and on the distribution side, I was wondering whether you had any thoughts of how do you harmonize some of these efforts so that developing countries can have equal access?
So one of the design constraints that we try not to give the game designers we work with too many constraints because we want to enable them to just do the games they want to do. But one of the design constraints we have given them is that almost everything meaningful in your game or valuable in your game has to be available offline. So that what we're doing, for instance, in India, we're working with a local partner they'll figure out how to get the games onto devices that they will give to the kids. But we'll assume that connectivity maybe works once every 2 weeks, and even then not so well. And US schools are, I have to say, not that much better than rural India in that regard. I mean, sometimes they're a little better, but the eye-opener I had was I was walking through a North Carolina, a Charlotte school, and the building reminded me of a prison because the walls were all built out of 16-inch concrete, and you can imagine what that does for Wi-Fi in a building. And I said, oh yeah, well in our state the people who build our prisons also build our schools, which says something about our educational system, I think. But it means that relying on connectivity in the classroom is a nightmare. And there are all sorts of people working on it. Hopefully it will get better. Right. But if you want a product that is going to be used either internationally or in US schools in the immediate future, don't count too much on bandwidth.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, next question.
Wonderful panel, and a very important time, for the industry, because now we're going from just individual creators to well, now as a group, now can we group individual creators into, some kind of industry? So a restaurant doesn't exist on its own. You have to have a bunch of restaurants on a block, and then you have a destination. So what I heard so far for financing, going back to that question, and VCs get a lot of attention because VCs advertise, want to start a business? Hey, I've got this VC here that wants to do it. But there's usually, we turn down VC for our game, Tilt World. So I've heard private financing, I've heard grants, I've heard contracting, which was not necessarily a sustainable business, and build a product and then license it. I wondered if, aside from those four, what other ways are there to finance? Are we at the point where we, have publishers that are, financing other games, or is it, or you can just do the lean thing where you just, get together on weekends and game jam it?
Well, we fund. All of the projects we've provided. There are a few games that existed already where we've licensed, and some of those would be, pretty known to you. But for the most part, we provide the funding because these companies don't, especially if it's an ambitious project like Lexica, which can take 3 or 4 years before even you have the first version of it. That's not something that they typically have the capital to.
Great. Any other ideas on other sources of funding?
Sometimes we're interested in sometimes accelerating a particular part of it. So, for example, like HTML5 development is something that we might help a game developer do.
Okay, great. Next question.
Hi, my question is about measuring impact. So I think it was the person from Filament who mentioned that there's been a lot of research lately about how learning games aren't the best at necessarily teaching content, but they can be really good for other purposes like preparation for future learning or maybe engagement in the classroom or a subject matter that students aren't typically engaged in. And when you're talking about breaking into the markets of schools, I'm wondering how you guys who are working in the learning game space self-evaluate your product. If you say that my product makes kids learn, how are you actually evaluating that? And then how are you communicating that to schools so that if I, as a teacher, wanted to buy your product, I know what kind of learning gains I can expect from my students?
This is a terrific question, and it's one that gives me a lot of heartburn because a lot of times, like in terms of research methodology for evaluating the efficacy of learning games, there's a lot of different ways to do it. One of the most popular ways to do it is pre-post tests. You give a test, have them play the game, you do the intervention, then you give them another test. The problem with that methodology, of course, is that the best way to prepare for a test is a game that looks like a test. We don't want to make games that look like tests. We want to make games that look like what you talked about. So, I have this sort of pet theory that like the more complex the game is, the better the learning tool is, the more difficult it is to measure. So it puts us certainly in a difficult position. But I do think at this point, at least having data so that you can start the conversation is really important. I'm really excited to see what, say like Glasslab does in this space, because a lot of like the more in-depth analytics about what the player is doing in the game as they play through, as opposed to just doing a pre-test and a post-test, I think will eventually give us better insight into what the games are actually accomplishing for the students. But let's face it, cognition, super complex. You know, it would be really hard for you to measure whether or not I'm good at my job. I mean, there's external metrics, key performance indicators, et cetera. Could you give me a test? Probably not. So I think step one is let's at least acknowledge that it's difficult to collect this data and, you know, surround it with a whole bunch of caveats, but still try to collect it anyway, and like Glasses, try to advance the state of the art.
I agree with everything Dan said, and the way, and those are the, I would say what we've tried to do is focus on some indicators which are leading indicators which have face validity with educators and parents. So for Lexica and all of our English language arts games, we have a lot of more sophisticated ones around specific ELA related skills like syntax and, you know, various aspects of vocabulary morphology. But the big indicator we have is simply that kids who play our games do more reading you know, over the course of their week. Of books of sufficient level of text complexities. They're choosing to read more, not just when they're playing their games, but the rest. And so we have a virtual library. And that's an indicator where we can say, look, the kids in your school or your kids are reading 3 hours more a week than they were before. That gets us out of, hopefully will get us out of the problem that Dan talks about. We don't want to be in the business of test prep. But I'm really happy to be in the business of our products get your kids to read more. And that's a much more comfortable space to be able to do things that we want to do.
Matt, did you have something?
So I would just say that we also just participated in a research study. Sorry?
No, please go on. Research study.
But the A Games research study that was done by Dr. Barry Fishman out of the University of Michigan and some other researchers that used GameUp as a platform. And one of the things that they found is teachers that are using games regularly in the classroom are just doing more formative assessment than teachers who aren't using games regularly in the classroom. And so we're big believers in formative assessments and the ability for teachers to make small tweaks and changes to their instruction on the fly. And another thing that came out of it is that while you know, stars and scores and kind of bells and whistles in the games are important and meaningful to kids, that there's a whole lot of other things that teachers find really valuable that surround the game, everything from essential questions to graphic organizers to the lesson plans, to the game guides, all kinds of other pieces that help develop assessment around a game and inform how successful it is.
Yeah, so the question around can games make kids learn better is a really interesting one, and I think it's one that a lot of people are really super interested in. I would change the question slightly though, but to can games help kids learn, and can games help teachers teach, right? They're not the end-all solution, and they need to stop being talked about as if they are the end-all solution. So as a teacher, yes, this game will hit this standard or will help you teach this standard, but then we have to ask the question, and I think we have to run studies on, after that kid is done playing the game, are they excited to learn more, right? And how valuable is that to a teacher? If the next thing that they're teaching that they may not have a game to help teach is easier to teach to that group of kids because now they're excited about it and they're not on their phones or, you know, thinking about lunch period. And so that exponential impact that games have the potential to have is really, really important. And I think, you know, the conversation in that regard needs to move from a teacher perspective. Hopefully we'll soon move from how do I implement this into a classroom to how do I make the most of this in my classroom.
Great, thank you.
Can I say one thing real quick just to build on that? So we're actually doing a study right now where we're looking at the game as a standalone intervention and the game plus curriculum activities that surround the game and what the difference is in terms of impact. And those research results actually, I think, are going to be ready today. So if you want to talk to me after the session, I'd be happy to share what we learn.
Sounds great. I also recommend everybody here learns about Net Promoter Score, which is NPS, which we use to look at consumer products and product market fit. So BrainPOP was canceled at school and students rallied and brought it back. That shows product market fit. Net Promoter Score is you ask the users to rate your service from 0 to 10, and then you subtract the number of people who gave you 8 to 10. You take that number and subtract people who gave you 0 to 4. So people who are rooting for you, you subtract the people who really hate you. And if your Net Promoter Score is over 60, you are really great. If it's low, you're in trouble. People don't like it. Next question. Right.
Hi. In your experience, is it a viable business model to sell direct to consumers, so to parents on either Steam or the App Store or wherever? And what are some of the pressures pushing that towards a yes or a no?
Great question.
Yeah, I think we should have a session just about assessment, but I don't think this works. And just so to answer your question, we are in the B2B business, but we have not gone to the business to consumer. Mainly because it's a different animal, and your marketing strategies and budget are very different when you go after consumers. We are seeing in our case in certain areas where some of our simulations are around topics that are becoming a little bit more mandatory, that we're seeing consumers coming directly to us and buying it. So it's kind of being driven right now by market forces and different legislation changes in different states. But I know some of BrainPOP, for example, sells to parents who wants to buy things for their kids. So you have examples of both in this case.
I would say, we took a tiny toe in the water with a game called 12 a Dozen, which came out this year, which got wonderful reviews. It was a learning experience for us. We didn't put much marketing behind it. So great reviews, didn't sell a lot. I would say the basic calculation, as far as we've been able to tell on direct-to-consumer for education games, the first thing is you need to segment the market by age group. It's a really different market for pre-K through 2 than it is for adolescents. Who's making the purchasing decision is really different, and they're really different problems. So Disney, really good at that younger market. They haven't solved the older one yet. The second thing I would say is the basic calculation is the cost of acquiring a user is going to be something like $5 a person. So if you're selling an individual game, that puts you in almost an impossible space if you're trying to break even. So that means that we're considering subscription model, right, where you have to have enough of a set of content, as some of the people on here do, that you're not just selling an individual game, because in that market, the cost of acquiring users is going to be just too high.
Great, thank you.
So we're strictly a B2C model, and I can tell you it's the wild, wild west. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that. So the competition is obviously fierce, and we're also pioneering a new area in the Apple Store. Actually, it's really exciting because we want to create a category that has games for social impact or games for good. And we saw a tiny light of this happen this November when Apple did the Red campaign. So I think there's going to be more areas for us to do that, but obviously the most important thing and why we have GGI 2.0 is we know marketing and user acquisition is a big deal.
And just real quick, what Justin said about age segmentation is really important. So pre-K, the motivation there for parents to buy is strong because it's fear, right? So is my kid going to be ready? Are they going to stack up when they enter school? As soon as they get to school, it's kind of like, all right, well, the schools have this, so we don't have to worry about it. And then the motivation isn't there to buy, and that makes it really difficult, which we're all struggling with to consumer. So we'll see how that plays out, but certainly pre-K is a great area for consumer, but after that it gets certainly much harder.
I would say it was very important for us to be in the App Store, not just the Apple App Store, but Google Play and a whole variety of places, because we try to be as flexible and as agnostic as possible, and we want our students to be able to come home and download an app from the App Store and log in with their subscription and be able to use us on their device of choice at home. So for us, we want to be where our users are, and that's incredibly important.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Hi there. As an active classroom teacher, first, I'm very enthused by the answers that you've already given to the questions out here. And I and my fellow science teachers are big fans of BrainPOP, so yay. But as a classroom teacher, I see that many of the games that go out there and should be focused on the kids, but I wonder out loud what your thoughts are about creating the same agency in kids that make games such a positive experience. How are you going to program in the agency for teachers so that we can edit what you are providing for us to our unique, because even though, yes, we all have standards and we have those checkbox, we might be giving 3 days, 1 day, a week. How are you going to create that sort of editable agency for teachers? And as a side question, if any of you need a classroom teacher to ever provide feedback, yay!
There you go. Matt, did you?
So yeah, first of all, we will absolutely take you up on that any day of the week. So I think it's a really interesting question. I think you have to, I think for us up here, it has to happen in levels. I think the first level of agency for the teacher is knowing what the student is doing while they're playing, to a certain degree, right? What they're learning, where they're at in the game. And that provides you, Karina just mentioned formative assessment. Like the oldest form of formative assessment is walking around the classroom and seeing and talking to kids and seeing what they're doing, right? So let's give you the ability to do that by giving you these reports to let you know what they're doing, so you can move away from the front of the classroom and move into that coaching mode. And then as you begin to use those reports and it becomes familiar to you and you become more comfortable with moving around the classrooms, then we can provide tools to you to give Easter eggs within the game, right? Like within the report, you can just say, I want to send this kid this little note, right? Or put a help button in the game that alerts you. Send it to your mobile phone, right? So I think the key there is less, I think agency within the game is going to be a really hard thing for the industry as a whole to build that in, but rather platform developers can build better tools for you to connect with students in a more meaningful way, and that will just get better as teachers get more and more comfortable with using games and using the platforms that the games live on.
Great, thank you. Maybe we have very little time left. Next question.
Can I just take that one, because I think there's an important point here, which is that the thing I would say we've learned the most about that is that if you make games to play that the teachers enjoy playing themselves, that gives you a huge leg up. I don't think it's a coincidence that there are so many teachers around the country who are trying to put Minecraft in the classroom. It's because they enjoy playing Minecraft. So that one of the things I think that's really interesting about educational games is yes, you can have the teacher as dungeon master, and that's a great mode, and we're working on that. But sometimes the teacher becomes the student, and the students are the dungeon masters, and it gives a whole way for the class to interact that wasn't so much possible before. And so I think that is, if a math teacher loves playing a math game, they will want to share it with their students.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name's Art Blake. I teach in the History Department at Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada. One of the things that I've noticed, and I think some other people have noticed, is that there hasn't been much discussion at the conference about the higher education sector. So I hear a lot about early childhood education, K through 12, but as someone who has no training in game design, I'm nonetheless in my urban history classes, encouraging and trying to teach students to make games to address questions of urban history, urban planning, urban studies. So I wondered if any of you could give me and other people a few tips on game designers or game publishing companies who are engaged in the higher education sector, both in terms of providing the tools for students, particularly in humanities and social sciences, to learn how to express their research inquiry through making a game, but also on the other side, providing games that can be used within the classroom to teach systems thinking in the way that you guys have talked so interestingly about how this is happening in K through 12.
You see a lot of universities now developing programs for engineers, and coding is a big thing. So there's a lot of companies that are now developing products that really actually teach you how to code. You can also go to a lot of these universities or schools that are teaching coding at a very early age. I think that's one answer. And I also met an amazing company from Israel that's doing a fantastic product that if you talk to me afterwards, I'll share with you the information and you can get that product and help your students.
I want to, just an observation, look at how this entire conversation turned into K-12 and teachers. Well, we're talking about an industry and the ability of games to change life everywhere, not just within the educational. So I think if there's one problem we have is that, and obviously it's a little bit tinted because a lot of these great companies work in that space, how we're all end up thinking about games. Oh, games is for kids in a school to use as part of a curriculum. I think that's one of the problems we're all having, that we go there instead of thinking about families at home, and you know, doctors, pilots, whatever else you want to think about where games can help people have a better life, have better skills, have better outcomes. So just an observation.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to the Institute of Play because they have fantastic game design curriculum online and available to everyone, and it's useful both in the higher education space and also for teacher professional development. And it's really wonderful tools to help you design games.
Great. Matt, did you have something about this question?
First of all great points. I was just going to say, you have a little bit more leeway in higher ed in terms of content and appropriate content and things like that. Look to the commercial game space. SimCity is an example, but there's extraordinary games out there that were never meant for, they're art, right? And they were never meant for learning or anything like that, but in the hands of a great professor can be really, really meaningful as subjects for discourse.
Great, thank you.
The best example of that I've seen is there's a whole college level, higher level math course where the whole course is about Rubik's Cube. And it's available online, you can download it, you can do it self-paced, but it also can be used as a college level math curriculum, quite rigorous.
I don't know about you guys, but I learn from every game I play.
Great, thank you. And one last question, we have 3 minutes. Somebody pick.
I think you guys answered it already with a lot of the great things that you said, but I believe the question was, can learning games stand toe-to-toe with commercial games?
Play 12 a dozen, and tell me what you think. So far, the reviewers, we get reviews from, real, Gamma Sutra or all those, on the rating aggregators. That game has done as well, and they don't care about education at all for the most part. So I think the answer is there are other examples of that, but there's yes.
Yeah, I agree. I would say they are standing toe-to-toe with commercial games. I just would say that there aren't enough of them, and it's one of our responsibilities at Glasslab, other folks here, to provide the environments for game developers to make more great games and improve the games that they're already making. And we're doing that in a number of ways, whether it's actually funding those games or providing a revenue share at Glasslab to game developers who want to make great games on and put them on our platform. And so the question really is, can we expand what's already being done for the games that are going toe-to-toe with commercial games?
Yeah, and as far as quality, absolutely. Like, no doubt. The difference is the marketing budgets, right? So as we expand, like Matt's saying, we'll get there, but it's going to take time, but we'll get there. The quality is there.
I think there is a point that was brought up earlier by Matt and Justin about time. And what we are starting to see is students that began playing something in school and then they go home and they might continue playing it for another hour. So if we're able to chip into that time that's normally given to commercial games after school, we consider that a real success.
Great.
Yeah, I get to close, excellent. I guess what I would say about that is, sorry to bring it back to K-12, but if you are developing for K-12, teachers don't necessarily need games that stand toe-to-toe with consumer games. And at some point, I think they'll want it. They don't want it yet. I think he does. But besides him, I think just the early majority, the people that we're actually trying to establish a market among right now, don't necessarily need the things that consumer games can offer. But it's partially a literacy challenge. It's partially a funding challenge. You talked about the money involved in marketing, the budgets for marketing. It's also just a great disparity in the budgets available for the actual development until that market is there. But that gap will close, and I think we'll see the bar for quality increase even in the K-12 space.
Thanks so much. And a big round of applause for these great companies.